back to the questions for a minute. One of the things I find so fascinating about the Origins Institute is, when I was growing up, I took my biology, I took my chemistry, I took my physics, but at the Origins Institute, those aren't standalone stuff. Could you just tell
Well,
us
I mean,
how
a
that
part of
works?
it, that's the reason I
and
moved
the questions.
to...
Go back to the questions.
Well, it's the reason I moved to ASU is Michael Krauss said to me, he'd come from Columbia, and he said, I can't compete with Columbia creating ASU as a new institution, but I can compete by not creating 19th century disciplines, which is what all the standard disciplines at universities are. I can create 21st century interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary institutes. And that was fascinating to me, to think about how to bring people together from different areas. We did a workshop on the origins of human uniqueness, which, by the way, I noticed is one of the subjects of the cover article on Scientific American by Curtis Marion, who happens to be at ASU.
Yes, exactly.
And ran our
I
workshop.
was there when you had
that. But we brought together, the question was, what made humans so, from an evolutionary perspective, so successful? What is the origin of modern humans that makes them unique from other species? And so we brought together paleontologists, anthropologists, but also geneticists, economists, psychologists, and to ask this question. And actually what I learned from that, which is important, was that that we failed. That in the sense that I wanted to see what key new research directions we could go into there. And what occurred to me after that meeting was that it was premature. That it was like all the famous story about people with an elephant, the blind people with an elephant feeling the tail or the trunk or whatever, and saying what an elephant is. Each individual saw human uniqueness from that perspective. And what was clear was that it was really premature yet, in my opinion, I know that Curtis talks about cooperation as a key aspect, and that certainly is a key aspect. Yeah. But I think it's premature. So when we run these institutes with people from different areas, we try and find out which areas might be productive by partly finding out which areas aren't productive. And I think that's an important, again, an important tool of, well, we all do it who are researchers. We all discover what works by first learning what doesn't work.
I'd like to give people a chance or two to ask you a couple of questions, but one thing I just want to toss out as a big question or a big idea for folks to think about is, could it be a productive thing to do to, at the K through 12 level, maybe throw out some grand challenges that way, the way that you have themed areas in the Origins Institute, and have that be one way kids address STEM questions? Could that possibly work at that age?
We tried, when I first moved to Origins, we actually tried to create considered making some charter schools around just that, and actually made proposals to the Department of Education to do that, and they were roundly rejected. So I don't know. I think it taught me, frankly, a great deal of skepticism about the professional community of educators, I guess. But and I don't mean to cast aspersions on anyone in this room, but I think, and we're seeing it happening. I think people are trying. People are voting with their feet. But I do think when you ask kids, what they're interested in, they're interested in these fundamental questions. That's why we ran, the Origins Project doesn't just run scientific meetings, it runs public events, and Marietta has been at some of them. We get 3,000 people, paying members of the public, to come to events on science every single time. And why? Because people are interested in these foundational, fundamental questions. How did the universe begin? Are we alone? Lots of questions. We're going to do one on actually the dangers of artificial intelligence, for example. These are questions. People are fascinated by these questions, but kids are fascinated by questions. They just don't think it's science. They think science is rolling balls down or sliding things down in inclined planes, which is boring and dull, which is what we teach in physics classes. But if they want to know about warp drive, or they want to know about black holes, or anything, or time travel. And it's all science, but these fundamental, interesting questions can be brought into the curriculum in every level. Again, another thing, I don't claim to be an expert at education, but one thing I always try and do whenever I'm teaching, no matter what level, is bring in the most modern areas that I'm thinking about. Because we give the students the impression in science, it seems to me, that science was done, at least the impression I had, was science was done 200 years ago by dead white men. And it was only when I learned that there were still open questions, and moreover, that the tools that you learn in high school can actually allow you to address problems at the forefront of science. It's cumulative. these tools actually are useful. They're not just exercises that are dull in a classroom. They have application to things you're actually interested in. And again, I encourage all teachers to talk about what interests them. It may seem parochial, but integrate that into every lesson they do, because unless the students see why that they're interested, again, as Craig said, unless this teacher, if you can't teach math unless you're interested in math, why are you interested in math? Well, integrate your specific interest into whatever you're teaching, and that'll convince the kids that there's something worth learning.
I love the idea of the focus on process. How do you ask the right questions, and then giving them something that matters to them to solve?
Yeah,
right?
it's
Yeah.
matter. I've
Yeah.
said it so many times, but in public that I'll say it again. To me, teaching is seduction, but everything is seduction.
He has said this.
No, I mean, if you're a car salesman, if you're a radio host, if you're a journalist, the idea is, I tell teachers the biggest mistake they make is assuming their students are interested in what they have to say. But it's true for any person. As I say, you substitute any discipline for teacher. You have to go to where they are and find out what interests them in order to get them to be interested in what you have to say. And to me, the interesting things are the questions, not the answers.